My son destroyed the school bathroom with the sledgehammer, and I've never been more proud of him. I got called out of work because my 13-year-old Josh had taken a sledgehammer to the boys' bathroom and caused $30,000 worth of damage. When I got to the middle school, Josh was sitting outside Principal Miller's office with ceramic dust in his hair and his knuckles bleeding through paper towels. The secretary kept shooting him these terrified glances while typing his expulsion paperwork. Principal Miller came out looking physically ill. She showed me photos on her tablet that made me feel sick because it looked like someone had detonated a bomb in there with every toilet smashed to pieces and every sink ripped from the wall and mirrors shattered everywhere. His math teacher, Mr. Harris, was standing in the corner of her office shaking his head. I can't understand what would make Josh snap like this. He seemed like such a good kid. This is just terrible. This was my kid who still sleeps with a nightlight and reads picture books to kindergartners during his lunch break. Josh, you better explain yourself right now before the police show up, I said, because Principal Miller had already told me she was calling them. Josh turned to Mr. Harris. You have hidden cameras in that bathroom, and you've been live streaming kids using the toilet to people online who pay to watch. Principal Miller blinked like she couldn't process what she'd heard. Josh, that's a very serious accusation to make against a teacher. Mr. Harris laughed, but it came out forced. This is ridiculous. The kid destroys property, and now he's making up stories to avoid consequences. I saw it on his phone during math tutoring when he stepped out to make copies, Josh said, showing us screenshots. There's this website where 40 people were watching us live during recess and typing these sick comments about which boys they wanted private videos of. Principal Miller took the phone reluctantly, like she didn't want to believe it. But her face started changing as she looked at the screenshots showing our school's bathroom from multiple angles, with a chat sidebar full of usernames and messages. Those could be from anywhere, Mr. Harris said quickly. That's probably not even our bathroom. That's the dinosaur poster you put up last month, Principal Miller said slowly, pointing at the screenshot. And that's the new soap dispenser we just installed. I recognized a kid from Josh's grade in one screenshot from yesterday, with people calling him by name because they'd been watching long enough to memorize which kid was which, based on bathroom schedules. Someone else must have put cameras in there, Mr. Harris tried, his voice getting higher. Maybe it's a student prank. I tried to tell the vice principal, but she said not to interrupt her lunch, Josh continued, his voice cracking. More kids kept going in, including this third grader wearing a dinosaur shirt that everyone in the chat was getting excited about and asking you to zoom in on. Josh showed another screenshot. Look at the username controlling the cameras. Mr. H_math. And here's where someone called him Harris in the chat and he responded. Mr. Harris's face was turning red. That's not proof of anything. Anyone could use that name. I couldn't find where all the cameras were hidden, Josh explained. They could be in the mirrors or the vents or between tiles or inside the soap dispensers or anywhere. The only way to make sure I got every single one was to destroy the entire bathroom. Principal Miller was studying Josh's phone more carefully now. Mr. Harris, why would Josh make this up? Because he's disturbed, Harris said desperately. Look what he did. He's obviously having some kind of breakdown. But that's not the only reason I grabbed the sledgehammer, Josh said, looking at me now. He showed us more screenshots where Mr. Harris was taking requests from viewers for specific kids and promising to install better cameras with higher resolution. Principal Miller's hand started shaking as she read. This is insane, Mr. Harris said, but sweat was running down his face. You can't possibly believe. Be quiet, Principal Miller snapped at him, then looked at Josh. Continue. There was a list of elementary school students organized by grade, with their photos and class schedules, and which bathrooms they'd use based on their classrooms. Mr. Harris had been planning to expand this operation. Why would I even know about the elementary school schedules? Mr. Harris tried, but his voice was weak now. Because you're on the district technology committee, Principal Miller said slowly. You have access to everything. Josh's voice broke completely. He had Mia's picture circled on the kindergarten enrollment list with notes about how small kids were worth more to certain buyers. My little girl who was starting school in 6 days, and this monster had already been planning to film her. Principal Miller grabbed Mr. Harris's phone from his pocket while he protested. This is my personal property. You can't. I absolutely can, she said, her voice like ice. We could all see the livestream app still running, except now the feed just showed rubble where the bathroom used to be. She started going through it, and her face went from pale to green as she found hundreds of video files organized by date and grade level. You destroyed 30 years of work, Mr. Harris said to Josh with pure hatred, all pretense gone. Thousands of viewers in 20 minutes. Principal Miller was already dialing the police while Mr. Harris stood there trapped between us and the door, realizing his life was over. But he had one last trick up his sleeve that none of us were prepared for. Harris dove for his laptop bag in the corner, and I saw his hand moving on his smartwatch as he started shouting about backups and cloud servers and how we'd never get everything. Principal Miller lunged for the phone she was holding with all the evidence while I threw myself between Harris and the door. The office turned into complete chaos with Harris trying to push past me while fumbling with his devices and Principal Miller backing away to protect the phone. Josh jumped up from his chair, even with his knuckles still bleeding through the paper towels, and grabbed Harris's arm to help me hold him back. Harris shoved Josh hard into the wall, and my son hit his shoulder but bounced right back to grab Harris's laptop bag. Principal Miller was screaming into her desk phone for security to get here immediately, while Harris's smartwatch and laptop started making these deletion sounds and beeping noises. I planted my feet and used my whole body weight to block the doorway, while Harris tried to shoulder past me, and Josh wrapped his arms around Harris's waist from behind. The secretary outside was yelling something about calling 911, and I could hear her voice shaking as she gave the school's address. Harris managed to get his laptop open, and his fingers were flying across the keyboard, while he kept trying to push through us. Josh yanked the laptop away, and it crashed onto the floor with the screen cracking, but still showing some kind of remote access program running deletion commands. Harris's face was bright red, and spit was flying as he screamed about his rights and how we were assaulting him and destroying his property. 2 patrol officers burst through the door within 3 minutes and immediately grabbed Harris's arms to pull them behind his back. He was still ranting about illegal seizure and demanding his lawyer while they clicked the handcuffs on. Principal Miller held up the phone to show the officers and me, and the main app was completely gone, but the browser history showed thumbnails of our school bathroom. My stomach turned seeing partial images of kids from Josh's grade that I recognized from the school events. The cached files were still there showing timestamps from this morning and yesterday and last week. One officer took the phone carefully and bagged it as evidence while the other one read Harris his rights. Harris kept insisting this was all a misunderstanding and demanded his union representative immediately. Josh was shaking as he told the officers everything he'd seen on Harris's phone during tutoring and why he had to destroy the bathroom to stop the cameras. His voice cracked when he explained about finding his sister's picture on the target list. I told the officers I fully supported my son's actions, even with the property damage, because he was protecting other kids. My voice stayed steady, but my hands were shaking, so bad I had to shove them in my pockets. The officers asked Josh to come to the station to give a formal statement, and I said we'd follow them there. Harris immediately started yelling that he wouldn't unlock any of his devices without his lawyer present, and the officers just nodded and bagged everything, including his broken laptop and smartwatch. More officers showed up and started taping off the destroyed bathroom as a crime scene, while the IT department got called in to lock down the entire school network. Parents started showing up within 20 minutes after getting automated calls about a police incident at the school. The hallway outside the office filled with angry voices demanding to know what happened and why police were here. Some parents recognized me and Josh and started asking if he was the one who destroyed the bathroom. The principal had to go out and tell everyone there would be an emergency meeting tomorrow to discuss the situation. I called Ariana from my car and told her to pick up Mia early from preschool, without explaining why at first. When I finally told her about Harris and the cameras and Mia being on his list, she went completely silent for 10 seconds. Then she started yelling about Josh destroying property, instead of just calling the police like a normal person would. Interesting conversation happening here. I wonder what they're really thinking. We got into this huge argument about whether he did the right thing while I was driving to the station. She kept saying there had to be a better way, and I kept explaining that Josh tried to tell the vice principal first. At the police station that evening, a woman introduced herself as a child advocate who would sit with Josh during his statement to protect his rights. They wanted to interview us separately, but I refused to leave Josh alone after everything that happened today. The advocate explained that having me present could complicate things legally, but I didn't care. Josh gave his statement in this small room with a camera recording everything while the advocate took notes. He went through every detail about seeing Harris's phone and finding the live stream and recognizing kids from the school. His voice broke when he talked about the 3rd grader in the dinosaur shirt and how excited the viewers got. The officer taking the statement kept having to pause because Josh would start crying. I had to give my own statement about what happened in the office and seeing the evidence on Harris's phone. They asked if I wanted to press charges against Harris for shoving Josh, and I said absolutely yes. Detective Deb Grimes from the Cybercrimes Unit came in around 8 that night and introduced herself. She had 3 laptops and a box full of Harris's devices that she was cataloging with evidence numbers. She explained that the remote wipe probably hit his main cloud storage, but data usually survives in temporary files and cache folders. Her team was already working on recovering whatever they could from the damaged laptop and his other devices. Around 11 that night, Detective Deb came back to the waiting area where Josh and I were sitting with empty coffee cups and told us her team found something. She showed us printouts of chat logs with timestamps and usernames, even though Harris had tried to wipe everything clean. The metadata showed connections between his school login times and when the streams went live during bathroom breaks. Josh looked sick, seeing actual proof of how many people had been watching him and his classmates for months. Detective Deb said the evidence wasn't perfect, but it would help build the case against Harris. The next morning, we met with Assistant District Attorney Rajesh Ahmed in his cramped office downtown. He spread Josh's screenshots across his desk next to the forensics reports and explained they'd need everything as evidence for trial. Rajesh warned us Harris would hire good lawyers and fight every charge while dragging this out for months or maybe years. Josh had to sign forms allowing them to use his phone data and screenshots as evidence. That same night, I got a text from Detective Deb that made me throw my phone across the room. Harris had posted bail after his lawyer argued he wasn't dangerous and had community ties. The judge set a protective order keeping him away from schools and kids, but he was walking free while we waited for trial. I couldn't sleep knowing that monster was out there, probably already planning his next move. My phone started buzzing non-stop the next morning with texts and calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Someone had leaked details about Josh destroying the bathroom and why he did it. Half the messages called Josh a hero for protecting kids, while the other half said he was a violent kid who should be locked up. Reporters kept calling asking for comments and showing up at our house until I had to disconnect the landline and turn off social media. Principal Miller sent an email to all parents saying Harris was on paid administrative leave, pending the investigation. Parents went crazy at the next school meeting, demanding to know why he was still getting paid and how long the school knew about this. The meeting turned into shouting matches with some parents, blaming the school and others defending them. 3 days later, we got an official letter that the school board scheduled an emergency meeting about Josh's disciplinary hearing. Even though he exposed Harris, Josh still destroyed $30,000 worth of school property. The letter said we could bring a lawyer and character witnesses to defend Josh's actions. I spent that night writing down every detail about why Josh had no choice but to destroy that bathroom. I went to the district office the next morning and filed a Freedom of Information Act request for any complaints or concerns about Harris from the past 5 years. The district lawyer tried to block it, saying it could interfere with the criminal investigation, but I knew my rights and demanded the documents. After 3 hours of arguing, they finally agreed to process my request within the legal time frame. Detective Deb called that afternoon with bad news about Harris's union representative filing a motion. The union lawyer claimed the seizure of Harris's devices violated his Fourth Amendment rights since Principal Miller grabbed his phone without a warrant. Detective Deb said if a judge agreed, it could throw out crucial evidence and destroy the case. She was working with Rajesh to fight the motion, but warned us to prepare for setbacks. 2 days later, I heard a knock at the door and found 2 women from Child Protective Services standing there with clipboards. They said they got a report about Josh's violent behavior at the school and needed to do a welfare check. I tried explaining about Harris and the cameras, but they said they still had to inspect our home and interview both kids. Josh sat on the couch answering their questions while they took notes about his mental state and whether he felt safe at home. They asked about weapons in the house and whether Josh had ever been violent before. Mia came out of her room confused about the strangers asking her if she felt scared of her brother. The whole inspection took 3 hours with them, checking every room and taking photos of everything. They said they'd file their report within a week, but I could tell they were judging us. That night, Ariana and I got into our biggest fight yet about what to do with the kids. She wanted to pull both of them out of school immediately, and either homeschool or find a private school. I thought they needed normal routines and friends to help them through this mess. We went back and forth for hours with her crying about keeping them safe and me arguing about not letting Harris win by hiding. Josh heard us fighting and came out saying he wanted to stay home for now, but wanted Mia to keep going to preschool. We finally agreed to let Josh do online school temporarily, while Mia finished her last week before kindergarten started. Neither of us felt good about the compromise, but at least we stopped screaming at each other. The next morning, another reporter showed up at our door with a camera crew asking for Josh's side of the story. I stood there in my doorway looking at the reporter's perfect hair and her cameraman already filming our front yard, with Josh's bike still laying where he dropped it yesterday. She kept pushing her microphone closer to my face, asking if Josh had shown violent tendencies before, and whether we knew about any history of mental illness in our family. I told her we had nothing to say and started closing the door, but she stuck her foot in the gap and said they were running the story tonight, with or without our input. The cameraman zoomed in on our house number and mailbox, while she talked into her microphone about the troubled teen who caused $30,000 in damage. I finally got the door shut and watched through the window as they interviewed our neighbor who barely knew us, but was happy to be on TV talking about how Josh seemed quiet and kept to himself. That night, the local news ran a segment calling Josh an unstable vandal with anger management issues, and they showed his school photo next to footage of the destroyed bathroom. Within an hour, someone had posted our full address on the news station's Facebook page, saying people should know where the dangerous kid lived. Pizza delivery guys started showing up around 9 that night with orders we never placed, and by midnight, we'd gotten 14 pizzas plus Chinese food and 3 different sandwich shops. The phone rang constantly with people breathing heavy or whispering threats about what they'd do to Josh if they saw him. I unplugged the landline, but they found my cell number too, and the texts started coming with photos of our house taken from the street. Detective Deb called the next morning saying she'd seen the news coverage and told us to document every pizza order and phone call for evidence of harassment. She said to vary our routines and maybe stay somewhere else for a few nights, but we had nowhere to go, and I wasn't letting some trolls drive us from our home. Rajesh called an hour later furious about the news story and said any public statements could hurt the prosecution's case against Harris. He told us Harris's lawyer was already using the coverage to paint him as a dedicated teacher being attacked by a disturbed student, and we needed to stay completely silent. I wanted to scream the truth about what Harris did, but Rajesh said the evidence would speak for itself in court, and anything we said now would just give the defense ammunition. 2 days later, we met with District Counsel Renata McIntosh in a conference room that smelled like old coffee and disappointment. She sat across from us with 3 manila folders and a legal pad covered in notes about the bathroom damage costs. She kept calling it vandalism and property destruction, like Josh had just been some punk with a sledgehammer instead of a kid trying to protect others. She said the district could press criminal charges for the destruction unless we agreed to a payment plan for the full $30,000. I told her to go ahead and press charges because any jury would understand once they heard about the cameras, but she just smiled and said the criminal cases were separate matters. Harris posted bail, and people are sending them pizzas they didn't order. This whole thing went from bathroom demolition to legal nightmare faster than you can say temporary cash files. Detective Deb sounds like she knows her stuff, though. She slid a payment agreement across the table, suggesting $500 a month for 5 years, and I pushed it back unsigned. The next week, we took Josh to see Gregory Browning, whose office had toys and books, even though he specialized in teenage trauma. Josh sat on the couch picking at the paper towels still wrapped around his knuckles from that day, and barely looked up when Gregory asked him questions. Gregory asked Josh to describe what happened, and Josh just shrugged and said he already told everyone. For 50 minutes, Josh gave one-word answers or stayed silent while Gregory took notes and told us this was normal for trauma victims. He said Josh needed time to process what he'd witnessed and done, and that forcing him to talk would only make things worse. Some parents from the school started a petition on change. Org demanding Josh be banned from all school property, and events calling him dangerous and unstable. They got 200 signatures in the first day, with comments about not wanting their kids near someone who could snap and destroy property. Other parents started a counter-petition supporting Josh as a hero who protected kids when adults failed to act. The community Facebook groups turned into war zones, with people taking sides and sharing screenshots of each other's comments to mock them. The school sent out an email about a bathroom repair fundraiser, asking families to donate what they could to help fix the damage. They actually had the nerve to call our house personally, asking if we'd like to contribute as a show of good faith to the community. I hung up on them, and then people started posting about how we refused to take responsibility for our son's actions. Someone called us entitled and ungrateful and said we should be grateful the school wasn't pressing charges. Meanwhile, the forensics team was making progress on Harris's devices, finding cached data that survived his remote wipe attempt. They recovered chat logs with timestamps showing Harris's username active during specific class periods when he was supposed to be teaching. The technical evidence created a timeline proving he was streaming during school hours, including dates and times matching Josh's screenshots. They found deleted spreadsheets on a recovered drive partition that made me physically sick to read. Harris had lists of elementary school bathroom schedules with optimal camera positions marked for each stall and sink area. He'd researched which bathroom spots had the best angles and least visibility from the hallway. He had notes about which grades used which bathrooms at what times based on lunch schedules and recess rotations. At the closed school board meeting that month, Principal Miller stood at a podium showing Josh's screenshots to 5 board members who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. They kept whispering to their lawyer who sat in the corner, taking notes and occasionally shaking his head. The board president asked about the district's liability and whether they could have known about Harris's activities sooner. Their lawyer advised them to make no statements that could be construed as admitting negligence or accepting responsibility for Harris's actions. 3 days later, the envelope from my FOIA request showed up, and I tore it open at the kitchen table while Josh ate cereal. The documents inside made my hands shake because right there in black and white was a complaint from 6 months ago where a parent wrote that Harris made her son uncomfortable by standing too close at the urinals and asking weird questions about his body during math help. The vice principal had written, "Unsubstantiated, no evidence of wrongdoing," across the top and filed it away without even talking to the kid. I called the school demanding Josh's disciplinary hearing date, and they told me it was scheduled for next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. I spent the whole weekend emailing teachers asking for character references, but most of them said they supported Josh privately, but couldn't put anything in writing because of district policy. 2 teachers did write letters saying Josh was a good kid who helped younger students, but the rest stayed silent. Rajesh called Monday morning and asked us to come to his office where he sat us down with coffee and explained the situation honestly. He said the wiped videos were gone forever, and we'd never get them back. But the chat logs and purchase records combined with Josh's screenshots might be enough for a conviction if the jury believed our evidence. He warned us the case would be stronger with the actual videos, but said he'd seen weaker cases win before. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up researching Harris's background online and filing more FOIA requests about his committee positions and what he could buy with district money. The paper trail started showing weird equipment purchases like high-resolution webcams marked as classroom supplies and wireless transmitters listed as science equipment. Tuesday morning, a certified letter arrived from Harris's lawyer threatening to sue us for defamation and demanding we stop talking about the case publicly. I called Detective Deb immediately, and she told me this was just intimidation tactics meant to scare us into silence, and we should keep documenting everything but not engage with his lawyer directly. She also had news that the streaming website finally responded to their subpoenas with partial IP logs showing hundreds of viewers from all over the world. Most used VPNs to hide their real locations, but 17 IP addresses came from our local area, which meant people in our own community were watching our kids. The next morning, police showed up at Harris's house with a search warrant and found 3 external hard drives hidden behind boxes in his garage. The drives were partially damaged, like he'd tried to destroy them with a hammer, but the forensics team thought they could recover some data from the intact sectors. 2 days later, they called to say they'd recovered video fragments dating back 2 years, showing this wasn't new behavior, but something Harris had been doing since he started at the school. Each new discovery made me angrier about how the school were ignored warning signs and let this monster near our kids for years. Gregory Browning called after Josh's 3rd therapy session to discuss his observations about Josh showing signs of hypervigilance, like checking bathrooms multiple times and feeling guilty about not reporting Harris sooner when he first got suspicious. We worked on establishing new routines to help Josh feel safe, and Gregory kept reminding Josh that he was a hero who saved other kids, not responsible for what Harris did. Ariana wanted to pull both kids out immediately and put them in private school, but I thought running away would send the wrong message to Josh about standing up to bad people. We argued about it for hours until we finally agreed to wait until after the criminal proceedings to make any decisions about switching schools. The forensics team kept finding more evidence on those damaged drives, including spreadsheets with kids' names and bathroom schedules, that made me want to throw up. Harris had been planning this for years and keeping detailed records of which kids used which bathrooms and when they'd be alone. Detective Deb said they also found financial records showing Harris received payments through cryptocurrency from viewers requesting specific videos of certain kids. The school board scheduled another emergency meeting, but this time they closed it to the public and only let their lawyer speak to the media afterward. He gave some corporate statement about cooperating fully with law enforcement while conducting their own internal investigation into potential policy violations. Meanwhile, Josh had to go to his disciplinary hearing, where 5 district administrators sat behind a long table looking at him like he was the criminal instead of the hero who stopped one. They placed him in an alternative education program for the rest of the semester because of the property damage, even though everyone knew why he did it. The alternative school was 40 minutes away and full of kids with real behavior problems who'd been expelled for drugs or fighting. Josh came home the first day with his backpack torn and his lunch money stolen by older kids who called him a snitch. I wanted to march down there and raise hell, but Josh begged me not to make things worse for him. Ariana cried every night about what this was doing to our family, while I stayed up researching legal precedents and filing more paperwork. The investigation kept expanding as more evidence surfaced, and Detective Deb said they were building a solid case, despite the destroyed videos. My boss called me into his office the next morning and closed the door behind me. He sat down and pulled up my attendance record on his computer screen, showing all the days I'd missed for court dates and meetings with lawyers and taking Josh to therapy. He told me my performance review was coming up, and this was going to hurt my rating, which meant no raise this year, and maybe even a warning letter in my file. He suggested I take unpaid leave until things settled down, because the company needed someone reliable in my position. I walked out of there feeling like I'd been punched in the gut, because we needed every dollar with Josh's therapy bills and the security system we'd just installed. 3 days later, we had to go to Josh's disciplinary hearing at the district office. 5 administrators sat behind a long table with folders full of paperwork about the bathroom damage, while Josh sat between me and Ariana looking small in his dress shirt. They went through all the destruction he'd caused and showed photos of the broken toilets and smashed sinks and shattered mirrors. The head of student services said they understood the circumstances, but $30,000 of damage couldn't be ignored. They placed Josh in the alternative education program for the rest of the semester, which meant driving 40 minutes each way to a school full of kids who'd been expelled for drugs and fighting. Josh picked at those paper towels around his knuckles while staying quiet with the therapist. That detail really makes me wonder what's going through his mind during all this mess. Josh's hands were shaking when they handed us the paperwork, but at least they weren't expelling him completely. The town hall meeting that week turned into total chaos. The auditorium was packed with angry parents demanding answers about how Harris could have done this for so long without anyone knowing. The school board members sat on stage, giving these empty corporate answers about conducting internal reviews and implementing new safety protocols. Someone in the back started yelling that the whole board should resign for failing to protect kids. Another parent stood up and said her son had been acting weird about using the bathroom at the school for months, and now she knew why. People were screaming at each other about whose fault this was, while the board members just sat there looking like they wanted to disappear. More kids started coming forward after the news coverage spread. Rajesh called to tell me 3 former students from years ago had contacted his office saying Harris had done things to them too. One was in college now and said Harris used to make him stay after class for extra help, then touch him inappropriately. Another said Harris took photos of him changing for gym class when he was supposed to be supervising. Rajesh said this helped build a pattern of behavior, but it meant more traumatized kids would have to testify if this went to trial. 2 weeks later, I was grocery shopping when this guy I'd never seen before walked up to me in the parking lot. He said Harris wanted me to know we could work this out quietly if we were reasonable about the damages. I immediately called Detective Deb, who told me to write down everything I remembered about what he looked like and what he said. She filed it as a violation of the protective order since Harris wasn't supposed to contact us, even through other people. The judge agreed and granted expanded search warrants based on the violation. Investigators got access to Harris's bank records and found multiple accounts he'd been hiding money in. They also got into his cloud storage that he thought he'd deleted and started finding more evidence, including encrypted folders with passwords they were working to crack. The forensics team found receipts showing Harris had bought 12 different spy cameras over the past 2 years, using the school's technology budget. He'd marked them as classroom equipment for recording student presentations, but the model numbers matched the exact cameras they'd found pieces of in the destroyed bathroom. The paper trail went back even further, showing he'd been planning this whole thing since he got on the technology committee. A maintenance worker named Carl called Detective Deb, saying he needed to tell someone about last summer. He said Harris had volunteered to supervise the bathroom renovations, even though that wasn't his job, and kept asking specific questions about where the new fixtures would go and how the ventilation system worked. Carl thought it was weird at the time, but figured Harris was just bored during summer break. Now he realized Harris had been figuring out the best spots to hide cameras where they wouldn't be noticed during regular cleaning. Renata McIntosh held a press conference on the school steps, saying the district had never received any credible warnings about Harris and they'd followed all proper procedures. I watched her on TV lying through her teeth and got so mad I posted the FOIA documents online showing the complaint from 6 months ago. That got ignored. The local news picked it up immediately and started running stories about the district's failure to investigate. Renata tried to do damage control, saying that complaint didn't have enough detail to warrant action, but parents weren't buying it anymore. That night, someone posted our home address on this sick website with a message saying we'd ruined an innocent man's life. The comments underneath were full of threats about what they wanted to do to our family. I called the police, and they increased patrols on our street, but said there wasn't much else they could do about online posts. We installed more cameras around the house and started changing our routes to work and school. Ariana stopped letting Mia play in the front yard, and we had to explain to her why strangers might be dangerous without scaring her too much. The detective called the next morning with more files they'd pulled from Harris's damaged drives and asked me to come look at something important. I drove to the station while Ariana stayed home with the kids, and Detective Deb met me in the parking lot looking tired. She walked me to a conference room where boxes of printed screenshots covered the table and pointed to a folder marked with next week's date. Inside were detailed notes about kindergarten students, including bathroom schedules and which kids would be alone at what times. Mia's name was circled 3 times with notes about her small size and how she'd be starting Monday morning in Mrs. Curtis's class. The room started spinning, and I grabbed the table to steady myself while Detective Deb got me water. She showed me timestamps proving Harris had been updating these files just 2 days before Josh destroyed the bathroom. If Josh hadn't acted when he did, Mia would have been filmed starting her first week of school. I made it to my car before breaking down completely and sat there in the police station parking lot crying harder than I had since my dad died. Detective Deb knocked on my window after 20 minutes to check on me and said they were adding more charges based on this evidence. 3 weeks later, we sat in the courthouse for Harris's preliminary hearing, where his lawyer argued every piece of evidence should be thrown out. The lawyer claimed Principal Miller had no right to search Harris's phone without a warrant, and that made everything they found inadmissible. Harris sat there in his suit looking smug, while his lawyer talked about Fourth Amendment violations and improper seizure. The judge listened carefully and asked detailed questions about the exact sequence of events in Principal Miller's office. Rajesh argued that Harris had been caught in the act of committing crimes against children, which created exigent circumstances. The judge took a recess to review case law and came back looking serious. She ruled that while the initial phone seizure was questionable, the screenshots Josh took independently were admissible evidence. However, she said most of what they found on Harris's actual phone couldn't be used in court because of how it was obtained. Rajesh met with us afterward and explained this was a setback, but not fatal to the case. He said they still had Josh's screenshots, the purchase records showing Harris bought cameras with school funds, and testimony from maintenance workers about his suspicious behavior. Over the next few days, he interviewed more students who noticed Harris acting strange around the bathrooms. One kid remembered Harris adjusting something in the ceiling tiles during class, and another saw him carrying small boxes into the bathroom after school. Rajesh built a timeline showing Harris's movements and purchases that painted a clear picture even without the phone evidence. Meanwhile, lawyers started calling about civil suits against the school district for failing to protect students. 5 families filed lawsuits within a week, demanding damages for emotional trauma and the district's negligence in supervising Harris. The district's insurance company got involved, and suddenly everyone was talking about settlements and liability limits. Renata McIntosh called offering to settle our potential claim quietly if we agreed not to discuss the case publicly. We told her to contact our lawyer and hung up. The district attorney's office called with unexpected news about Josh's destruction of property charges. They offered something called a deferred prosecution agreement, where Josh would do community service and counseling instead of facing criminal charges. If he completed everything successfully, the charges would disappear completely, like they never happened. We accepted immediately, and Josh started meeting with Gregory Browning twice a week to process everything. Gregory helped us create new routines to help both kids feel safe without living in constant fear. We installed better locks, varied our routes to the school, and set up check-in times throughout the day. Ariana and I had to coordinate our work schedules, so someone was always available if the kids needed us. Josh started his community service at the library teaching computer skills to seniors while working through his trauma and therapy. Gregory said Josh was handling things remarkably well considering what he'd witnessed and done. 2 months into the case, Principal Miller sent an email to all parents announcing her retirement at the end of the semester. She said it was time for new leadership after 30 years in education, but everyone knew the real reason. The vice principal who'd ignored Josh's warning got reassigned to a desk job at the district office where she couldn't ignore any more kids. The school board held emergency meetings about new safety protocols and bathroom monitoring systems. Parents demanded answers about how this could happen for so long without anyone noticing. Then Harris's lawyer contacted Rajesh with a plea offer that would avoid a trial completely. Harris would plead guilty to reduced charges and serve 8 to 12 years in prison if we agreed not to push for the maximum sentence. Rajesh explained that accepting meant Josh and other victims wouldn't have to testify in court and relive their trauma. He said trials were unpredictable, and this guaranteed Harris would go to prison for a significant time. We spent hours discussing it with Josh, who said he just wanted it to be over so he could move on with his life. Other victim families felt the same way, and nobody wanted their kids on the witness stand being questioned by Harris's lawyer. Josh teaching computer skills to seniors as community service while working through trauma. That's some serious character growth happening right there. From sledgehammer hero to patient tech teacher, this kid's showing more maturity than half the adults who failed him. After 3 days of agonizing discussions, we told Rajesh we supported accepting the plea deal. Josh looked relieved when we told him he wouldn't have to testify and said maybe now he could stop having nightmares about that day. The courtroom was packed 3 weeks later when we went for the plea hearing, and I kept Josh between me and Ariana while Harris sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit. The judge read through each charge slowly, and Harris had to say guilty after every single one, while Josh squeezed my hand harder with each admission. 8 to 12 years was the sentence recommendation, and some parents behind us started whispering that it wasn't enough for what he'd done to their kids. The judge accepted the plea and set sentencing for 2 weeks later where victims could give impact statements if they wanted. Josh told us in the car that he wanted to speak at sentencing, even though Ariana thought it would be too hard for him. We spent the next 2 weeks working with Gregory on what Josh wanted to say and practicing it until he felt ready. The sentencing hearing was even more crowded, and Josh's hands were shaking when they called him to the podium, but his voice came out clear. He talked about how he destroyed the bathroom to protect kids who couldn't protect themselves, and how he'd do it again if it meant keeping them safe. I watched Harris stare at the table while Josh spoke, and when my son finished, the whole courtroom was silent, except for some parents crying. The judge gave Harris 10 years with possibility of parole after 7, and Harris got led away in chains while Josh watched with this look like a weight had been lifted. 2 days later, Rajesh called to say the district wanted to settle all the civil suits with a big fund for victim counseling and new safety rules for schools. The settlement came with an NDA that meant we couldn't talk publicly about specifics, but the money would cover years of therapy for Josh and other kids. We signed the papers because the kids needed help more than we needed to make statements, and at least the district was admitting some responsibility. Both kids started at new schools the next month, with Mia going to a private elementary across town, and Josh in a special day program for kids dealing with trauma. The first day was rough, with Mia crying about missing her old friends, and Josh refusing to use any bathroom at his new school. I had to leave work early 3 times that first week when the schools called about one kid or the other having a panic attack. My boss pulled me aside and said I needed to figure out my priorities because all these absences were becoming a problem for the team. I switched to night shift at a warehouse the next week, which paid way less, but let me be home during the days when the kids might need me. Money got tight fast with the pay cut, plus paying for Mia's private school, even with some financial aid they gave us. We started buying generic everything and canceled cable, and I picked up weekend shifts when Ariana could watch the kids. Josh's therapy sessions with Gregory were helping, but progress was slow, and some days he'd barely talk, while other days he'd work through stuff for the whole hour. Mia started having accidents at the school because she was scared to use the bathroom alone, and the teacher had to escort her every time. Detective Deb called one afternoon to update that they'd tracked down 12 local viewers through IP addresses and payment records, but most used fake names. She said they were building cases, but these investigations took forever, and some viewers might never get caught because of the technology they used to hide. The months passed with this new routine of therapy appointments and school meetings, and me working nights then trying to sleep while the house was empty. Josh made friends with another kid in his program who'd been through something similar, and they started eating lunch together, which felt like progress. Mia's teacher said she was doing better academically, but still struggled with bathroom anxiety and social situations where she felt unsafe. 6 months after everything started, our new normal meant Josh saw Gregory every week and did his homework in the library instead of his room. Mia would only use the bathroom at the school if her special buddy went with her, and she'd started sleeping in our bed most nights again. I checked the locks 3 times before leaving for work, and had installed cameras at every entrance, even though Ariana said I was being paranoid. We'd found ways to cope with Josh doing better in his special program, and Mia making one good friend who came over for playdates. That morning I was dropping Mia at her new school, and she pointed at the hallway wall where they had the exact same dinosaur poster from her old school. She laughed and said Josh would probably hate that poster now, and asked if we could get ice cream after school like we used to. Her ability to find normal moments in our changed life made me think maybe we really would get through this even if different from before. Thanks for hanging out and wondering about all these questions with me today. It's always interesting seeing where curiosity takes us. Until next time. And hey, like the video, it helps more than you think.